Okay, we are going to be starting on chapter 9 in your text, updating and validating your research. This is week 7 lecture for legal research and writing. This is kind of a short chapter, but it's a really important chapter. Updating and validating your research. What does that mean? Well, maybe you have relied upon a case in your motion or in your research, and that case has been overturned. It's no longer good law. So now you are basing your argument, your position that you're arguing to the court or that you are putting in a memorandum to your attorney, that's based on not good law. And that's not good. We always want to make sure that the sources we are citing are good, accurate, current sources. And the law is always changing. Every day there are cases being decided. Okay? Also, when you update your research, you're seeing if any other court is relying on a case that you're relying upon. Why is that? Well, maybe another court is saying, yep, this case is the bomb. This is the best case that's ever been decided in the history of court decisions. And maybe something in another court's written opinion will be something that will help your argument. But you better check that out. You better make sure. Or it could be that another court is going to say, yeah, this is a really good decision, but on this one part of the decision, we think the court made a bad move. Well, maybe that's the one part of the decision that you're relying on. So you want to make sure you're updating your research regularly. What does that mean? It means you go a little crazy. It means that before you turn in a motion to the court, you double check all of your sources to make sure that they're all good sources. It means before you give a memorandum answering a legal question that an attorney in your office has asked you to research, you double check. You make sure everything is still good current law. Before you turn in a brief to the court, you make sure you update and you validate all of your research. You could update it and again find something that's fantastic, and so you want to add it into your memo or your brief or your motion, whatever it is. I had a case like that once. I had a case on guardrails, and I was just a law student. I was clerking, and the attorney I worked for said, "Can you find me any kind of a case that has to do with guardrails failing and the standard that will be used by the court?" And I looked, I really couldn't find anything. And I found one little statute. And none of the cases in there were terrific, but I updated my research. I looked for newer cases that actually might cite these cases that weren't so great, but they were something. And I hit a nugget. I found a case out of the county where this particular lawsuit was going to be filed that said exactly what we wanted the law to say on guardrails. And I took it into the lawyer and I got a raise that day. Literally, I got a raise that day for doing that research because I went the extra mile and I updated my research. Now, back then in the Stone Ages, it was a little harder to update your research because you had to go to books and you had to go from this to this to this book. And now, with a keystroke on your computer, get yourself a cold beverage, sit down, and read all the cases. Again, in the old days, I used to have to get book after book after book after book, and then put them on the cart and go get more books. Today, you'll get, with a keystroke, that same research that's actually better than what I used to do with just books in law school. Why is that? Well, because with digital research, everything is automatically updated that day. You don't have to wait for anything to go to press. You don't have to wait for these pocket parts to get stuck in. You don't have to wait for anything. It's instantaneous. So you know the status of the law the minute you do the keystroke, which is beautiful. So how do you do the keystroke? Well, your book in chapter 9 goes through that. There are basically two different ways you can update your research. The first is through Shepard's, which is a service that actually goes through, and if I have a case site, they will search every case in the country to see if that case site shows up, and then they'll list every single one of those cases. Okay, a company named Lexis picked up Shepard's, and so you do it through Lexis, which is an online digital library. We don't use Lexis for a number of reasons. Lexis was the first real digital library out there for legal research, and it was fantastic because, again, you didn't have to waste time going all over the library pulling books. If it was missing from the shelf, you didn't have to hunt it down. You didn't have to go to the physical book of Shepard's, look up case citations, and then pull all those cases. You don't have to do that anymore. But Lexis kind of fell behind West because West already had a system with the key citations where you could key into cases, already had that digital editorial service that helps streamline your research. West pulled way ahead when they finally launched Westlaw. So we're going to rely on Westlaw. And the feature within Westlaw that you use to Shepardize, which is what we all call it because that's the books, that's the service that was originally put in place to make sure you could update and validate your cases, you're going to use something called KeyCite. Okay? So if you look on page 366 and 367 of your text, it'll show you what will happen if you hit KeyCite. Okay? At the top of the screen, there'll be something that says KeyCite. You hit KeyCite, and then everything will be summarized for you. And we'll go through everything. This is subletter B on page 366. So if you want to know about filings, if you want to access court documents that mention whatever the case is that you are looking at, you hit filings. And every single case that has ever been decided that mentions the case that you're looking at, and your book is using the case of Hubert, okay, the case of Hubert. If you want to know every single case that ever mentioned your case, hit filings, and they'll all come up. And then you can click on each one of them individually, read the synopsis, read the case if you want to, see whether it's a case that distinguishes itself from your case, that says your case was crappy or says your case was great. Okay? The big one you want to look at is if the case has been overturned. Sometimes an appellate court or a Supreme Court will overturn a decision, and you need to know whether that's happened. Okay? The second thing that you can check on, and this is a specific tab on the KeyCite site for the case that you're looking at, you can put most negative treatment. You will find every case out there that says the case that you're looking for, and again, the case that they're talking about in the book is called Hubert. If it's been overturned, if it says the decision has some problems to it, anything negative. Now, why would I want to look that up? Well, maybe somebody else has put Hubert in their brief, and I would like to say Hubert stinks. Do I have to do all of that research? Nope. I just hit the most negative treatment tab in Westlaw, and they've done that work for me. Or if I'm putting Hubert into my memo or my motion, I want to know what the other side is going to say about this Hubert case before they get it, so that I can write in my motion, hey, there was this case out there that didn't think that Hubert was a great decision, but the facts in Hubert are a little different from ours, and so you can distinguish it before the other side gets a chance to slam you. Okay? So that's a really helpful tab when you're writing a motion. Really, really helpful. Another tab that you can select is History, and that'll give you a graph of all the other cases that followed your case. Not just mentioned it, but thought that your case, the case that you're relying upon, was so good that they adopted the same kind of ruling. Now, why is that good? Okay, so maybe I'm relying on the Hubert case, but I'd like to bolster it with some other cases. That's where I go. Okay. The next tab option that you have is Citing References. And that will link you to not just other cases, but maybe law review articles or treatises or any other kind of writing that has been done that mentions the case that you're interested in checking and updating. Okay? And Table of Authorities is the last tab that you'll see on the KeySite screen. It will list every single case that's cited in the case that you're using. What? What are you talking about? Okay, so let's say that I'm updating the Hubert case. Is this still good law? What are the cases that are bad that says Hubert's bad? What are the cases that are good that followed Hubert? Terrific. Now, in the case of Hubert itself, the court will probably rely upon other cases, right? It's called stare decisis, where we look to other cases. So maybe in the Hubert case, the judge says, hey, there was this case of Smith versus Jones, and we think that the authority or the ruling in Smith versus Jones really controls, and that's why we're making this particular ruling in Hubert. If you click on Table of Authorities in the KeySite section of whatever case it is you're looking for, or that you're updating, it will list out every single case that Hubert relied upon or mentioned, and will tell you whether or not those cases are still good law. Okay? Again, you can go down a rabbit hole really quickly. There is a point where you have to say no. I very rarely will use the Table of Authorities KeySite tab, because to me, that's a rabbit hole. Okay? Either Hubert's still good or Hubert's not still good. Do I really care about all the other cases that they relied upon? Most of the time, no. Now, if I'm filing something in the Ohio Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court or even the Circuit Court of Appeals in federal court, you betcha I'm going to be checking these Table of Authorities. If I'm filing something at our local Court of Common Pleas, not so much. Not so much. I still want to know whether Hubert is still good law or not. I still want to know, hey, are there other cases out there that followed Hubert that might help me in my case? Absolutely. But the Table of Authorities, really, you can spend so much time that you'll never ever get your case finished. You'll never ever get whatever it is you're writing finished, because you're going down these rabbit holes. Okay? So the first 3 tabs in the KeySite you must do. The 4th, not so much. The 5th, in a big case, do that. Okay? If there are quotation marks after an authority, it means that the case or authority directly quotes from Hubert. If there are headnote citations, then it means that the case discusses Hubert and doesn't just mention it. A KeySite alert will automatically monitor the status of your case and will notify you as to whether or not another case has been decided, And this is really, really helpful. Maybe I'm doing my research 2 weeks before I get my motion written. Anything can happen in 2 weeks. So that key site alert, if you avail yourself of it, will notify you, hey, guess what? There was a hearing 2 days ago, and this decision came out, and you may want to know about it. Okay? It's like having your own personal, alert. It's wonderful. Okay? Now, if we're using key site on statutes, it's kind of the same thing. You're going to look for different tabs: the notes on the decision, the history, the citing references, and the context and analysis. If you're trying to show that a statute is no good, or you're trying to argue that the reason for the statute doesn't apply to your particular case or does specifically apply, all of these are important. When a law is passed, there are hearings, there are drafts, there are rationale written for why the statute is actually being proposed and passed. All of those can be important. Now, if you're talking about a DUI statute, is the history of it important? Maybe, but typically you're just going to sort of stick with it. If you're talking about Obamacare, much bigger statute, the reason the legislative history is huge, and you're arguing something about Obamacare, you probably are going to want to key cite it. Okay? So key citing a statute isn't as important, and probably breaking every legal research rule telling you that, isn't always as important as doing the cases. You want to know that the statute is still good law, of course, but frankly, it's going to tell you that when you look up the statute anyway, because it's going to tell you the date that it went into effect, and it's going to tell you if it's still in effect. So the key cite really isn't all that important. Okay? If you are using other authorities, things like American Law Review reports, or if you're looking at restatements or law review articles, you can also key cite those. I'm not really sure why you would want to, but that service is available to you through Westlaw. The nice thing about Westlaw is they automatically tell you whether or not it's good law. Even before you hit the key site, it'll tell you whether or not it's good law. Really important that you understand this concept, because if you go and you turn in a memo to an attorney you're working for and the law's not good, you're really kind of screwing that lawyer, because he's going to go to court and someone's going to say that's not even good law anymore. They're going to look like an idiot and you're going to lose your job. So it's really important that you understand this concept of updating and validating your law. And again, it's so much easier now than it was in the old days with the digital library. Hit the key site, check it, make sure it's still good law, see if there are any other cases out there that will help you. Make sure you know about the cases that are going to hurt you so that you can take the sting out before they even file their motion. Tell your lawyer, hey, look, this is the good, this is the bad. That's your job, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Key cite helps you do that, and it's with literally one keystroke. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you a couple of brief assignments to do on this. Again, we are only focusing on Westlaw, not focusing on Lexis. If you're curious, you can go to the Trumbull County Law Library. Tell them that you would like to do some Lexis research, just if you're curious. See if you might like Lexis better. They will let you do that for free. Okay? And the Trumbull County Law Library is right on the square, right across from the courthouse. Okay? All right. If you have any questions, email me. Thanks.